Okay, so I think we can continue with the further discussions. I was just expecting that uh, this will be taken over by visiting faculty for one section, but it I think it is taking time. So what we'll do is we will move on to the next unit, that is on floods. Okay, so in the beginning, in the first unit, we were just trying to understand what are the different types of natural disasters, and which are predominant disaster, and why we should be worried about this, and how do we define disasters. Okay, and what is our intention of learning the subject. Okay, and how it will be useful for us. Okay, so just to make a summary of what is the objective of this, the subject itself is to sensitize the architects, especially us, to look at this as a problem, and not to get carried away by other things. Okay, we should also look at buildings and design of buildings and planning from a all dimensions, right? We should look at it from all dimensions, not only from aesthetics and bringing some kind of architectural character to the city, so on and so forth. So one such dimension is disaster, and what we should do, what we can do, is something that we should learn. Okay, so in the second unit, like I told you, after giving some idea on what is the frequency of disasters that occurs in across the world, and specifically in Indian subcontinent, there's a topic on floods, earthquake, and cyclone, and traditional knowledge. Okay, so these are the three things that probably we'll have to see in detail. So today we'll start with the floods, and we'll see some aspects of things that is mentioned in your syllabus, like problems of floods in India, causes, and how do we understand this, and what are the risks associated with the flood, and how do we categorize this damage. And the second aspect, like flood mitigation measures, flood zoning, and how do we design buildings, we will discuss this as a separate lecture, okay, along with the case studies. So this is again just to put a broader perspective on floods, okay, and how do we understand the subject, and how do we take it further. Okay, so what is the source of my discussion? I'll be sharing one paper here. Okay, you can see that this is a recent review paper on flood management in India, a focused review on current status and future challenges. Okay, and International Journal of Disaster Risk Reduction is one of the premier journal where current research on disaster is being discussed. Okay, so what we'll do is we'll go through this paper to understand the overview of flood as a disaster, and what is happening in India, and what is recommended, and how do we proceed further when we discuss about floods. We have seen in the first unit also, the flood is one of the disaster that is frequent. Okay, and we have seen a large number of occurrence of floods across the world, and India is no exception for that. And if you see recently, one of the reports published that 41% constituted the largest percentage of disaster known from 2008 to 2017. So that means 4 out of 10 disaster is associated with floods. Okay, that's the data that has been accumulated for this period. And if you see, okay, 40% of the natural disaster is associated with floods. Okay, but if you see the numbers, almost 50% of the more than 50% of, or let's say closer to 50% of the loss of life has occurred because of flood and associated disaster. So in that way, this is also one of the predominant disaster that needs understanding, and we should also have we should also know what we can do, or how India is preparing, how cities are prepared for this kind of disaster. And prior to this, we had a revision of your syllabus, and flood was added only in the last year, but before year. And one of the reasons for that is actually Vijayawada. We are based in Vijayawada, and when we set the when they set the syllabus in the initial stages, this was not our priority, because the kind of terrain that we have, the kind of disaster that is faced here is slightly different. However, given the context, given the broader challenge of climate change and its related issues, flood is eventually added into the curriculum, just to give an understanding on why this subject is relevant. And of course, now whether the city has a river or not, whether the city is coastal or non-coastal, we do get floods in any and everywhere, right? So the subject becomes relevant, and we should have understanding on this, what we can do. Okay, first we should get familiar with some of the terminologies used in this process, and also we should know what the Government of India's initiative and the state government's initiative, and later probably we'll see how planning and design can help in controlling this. Okay, so that's the second part. What can we do for mitigation? What can we do for mitigation is something that we can dwell, something which will be of interest to us. We'll see that. And like I told you in the beginning, I'll bring my PhD scholar. She is also working on similar grounds. We are trying to come out with water sensitive urban design guidelines for preventing, I won't say preventing, let's say mitigation of urban floods. Okay, so how do we achieve, or what components of flood mitigation can be integrated in water sensitive urban design, and what kind of guidelines are required that architects and urban designers and planners can adapt, so that we can reduce the impact of flood in urban areas or cities. Maybe next week I will see if possible, I'll ask her to give a presentation on what she's doing and how she's approaching this particular problem. And if you see numbers, okay, if you normally what do? We compare the disaster with economic loss and life loss, right? And I have been saying consistently, this is our priority. Okay, saving one life is all the more important than any of the economic disaster that we can come over. Okay, so if you see the numbers in terms of economic loss, flood has been more devastating than any other disaster. And among the flood affected nation, India is known as one of the severely flood affected countries in Asia. Okay, and just to put things in perspective, this is number of flood events and total dead in Asian countries between 2010. This is 10 years data. You can see this is the blue one is the number of floods and the number of dead because of the floods, and more than 140 and 150 events have been recorded in 10 years time. Okay, and you can see the number of life that is lost because of this issue of flood. Whereas if you see China for the same period, the number of event is in fact more than what we have recorded, but the extent of damage that it has created, or they are able to manage in terms of saving life, is much higher. This is what we are trying to aim. Okay, so we can bring this little bit down. Okay, number of events in terms of some mitigation measures, planning measures, and design measures. We can bring little bit down, but we can't control it because it's a natural event. However, this can be drastically brought down. That is our ultimate aim. How do we bring this number to almost zero is what we are trying to aim for. And if you see the CVC report of India, Central Water Commission of India reports, it says that on an average 1650 people annually lost their life between 1950 to 2016. Okay, so it has been an annual phenomenon. Okay, and it's well documented that this is one of the major issues that that needs to be addressed. India has highest number of floods data among the Asian countries. Floods are not new to India as they occur with unfailing consistency, and it varies from region to region. And there are certain things here. There are three graphs that you can see. One is the economic loss, okay, that is quantified based on the numbers that is available, okay, and you can see, of course, there's a huge loss of economy as well, okay, and in terms of loss of life, like we have, like it is mentioned in the report, and an average 1500 plus death is recorded every year. Okay, and there is one exceptional here. I'll talk about it a little later. And also, this is loss of economy, and this is loss of life, and this is loss of in terms of people affected. Okay, in terms of people affected, you can see this huge number. Okay, so large number of people are getting affected, and this tells us that this is one of the subject that we should be addressing at the city level, and so on and so forth. And if you see the number, see, one of the things that we should know is when we read graphs, or when we read the data set, normally we say this is normal distribution of data set, right, and probability distribution, and we'll say that, okay, this is a good example. Is kind of a probability curve. But if you see, there's something called what is that, extraordinary number that you can see in an average occurrence. Okay, so I think there was an event in 2008, not 2000. I'm not able to recollect the exact date. Not 2008. It's way back. Somewhere here in early 1970s. Okay, there was one documentary on this. Maybe you can check this. This is also one of the interesting things that you can see. No one had a tongue to speak. There is a documentary like this. you can Google and then see what has happened during this particular time. Okay, you can directly type like this: no one had a tongue to speak. The untold story of one of the history's deadliest floods in India. This is pertaining to India, and you can see what has happened during that time and why this number. Okay, why this extraordinary number that you see here in the graph. Okay, so the leading cause of floods in India are some of the things are listed, which includes persistent monsoon rainfall, reduced river channel carrying capacity for high flows, river bank erosion and the siltation of channels, poor natural drainage in the flood prone areas, cloud burst and several other meteorological factors. Okay, so there are certain causes that is listed here. Okay, of that is first monsoon. Okay, and this has been, we have been seeing this for quite some time now. 2020 we had severe rain when we compare to 2021. Okay, and there is an increasing rainfall, increasing number of rainy days and number of amount of rain that we have received over a period of time. And I don't have the exact number to tell. Maybe if possible I'll try to get it for next time. If you 2015 we had severe rainfall, and 2021 was about to cross the amount of rain that we received in 2015. I'm talking for, let's say, for case of Chennai. I was trying to look at the numbers closely, and 2021 rainfall was almost about to cross the amount of rainfall that we received in 2015. And this change in monsoon rainfall and increasing rainfall is also one of the reasons for persistent flood in the cities. That's number one. Number two, reduced river channel carrying capacity. That means, for example, it can be for two reasons. The channel that is supposed to carry X volume of water may have to carry X plus 1 volume of water because of excess rain. Okay, that's one. Second thing is, we are also encroaching these channels. Okay, these channels, and we are because of the human induced activities, the carrying capacity of the channel is also reduced, and also the siltation is also one of the issues that is often associated with flooding. And many times you will come across, if you observe the news channels reportings and so on, there will always be a complaint on the riverbeds were not cleaned, or the channels were not cleaned before monsoon. Okay, and it is expected that every year before monsoon sets in, the channels are cleaned, so that in case of excess rain or usual rain also, there should not be an issue to the city. And many times that is overlooked, and as soon as some kind of disaster or some kind of issue arises, these things are again comes into the picture. One of the major thing that is associated with flood is the poor natural drainage system that we have in cities. Okay, and probably when my student she'll present her work, we have modeled some part of Bangalore city and checked what is the natural terrain, natural flow terrain or flow direction of floods, flood water, I won't say flood, natural flow of water in a city, how we have manipulated and how we have changed that topography. The water that which is supposed to, let's say, should have gone like this, now it is no longer going that from, let's say, this is higher point to a lower point, it is no longer going in that part, okay, because we have intervened somewhere here, we have diverted this water to go somewhere here and reach, okay, and in the process it no longer reaches the water the way it should reach. And in the process, what we have done is we have actually altered the natural terrain and the natural flow of the water itself. And that's one of the reasons, major reasons for frequent floods. And the second is, I'll also show you the case study today very briefly on how we did similar assessment for Chennai during 2015 flood. I'll show you how how the water bodies which were there in 1970s have shrunken from almost 250 square kilometers, remember, not meters, square kilometers of water body has shrunken to just 50 square kilometer of water body, okay. And where have these water bodies have gone? What happened to these water bodies? These water bodies have been taken over, built. A lot of construction has occurred. We have encroached these water bodies, okay. And it is natural that the water does not know whether people are there or not. It will take its own path, okay. So this deviation that we are making has a limit, okay. After that, the water will try to flow in its natural path, and in the process, the areas which are supposed to be let's say water catchment area, which is now inhabited by us, will all get flooded, okay. I'll show you Chennai's case that we have tried to model during 2015. Exactly emphasizing how this has been a problem. Cloud burst, I think you'll all be able to recollect. We had one issue last year, I guess, in the northeast, not northeast, northwest, in the Himachal area, I think. Severe cloud burst, and as a result, there was a flooding within a span of, I think, 4 hours. Heavy flooding within a span of less than 4 hours, and there is a lot of damage that has occurred. This is also one of the reasons associated with the floods, some of the causes of floods. Okay. Additionally, these are natural event. Okay, these are natural event, and we try to in some cases the flood gets aggrieved, or the intensity increases, or the intensity and extent of damage increases because of the kind of activity that we do. In addition to that, to the natural events, rapid urbanization and changes in land use pattern have given rise to a new type of disaster called urban floods. Why are we calling it as new? Because it is, see, we are talking historically, okay. Historically speaking, the word urban and urban flood is new, actually, relatively new, less than 100 years. Okay, we can call it. So, because of this rapid and uncontrolled or unscientific urbanization, increasing the footprint of the city, okay, in all direction possible, and encroaching all the water bodies and reservoirs which are supposed to act as sponges, okay. These are some of the words that you will come across when you read about what is it, how water body can be used as a mitigation for floods. So water bodies are supposed to act as a sponge in city, which means it will retain the water. Okay, so suppose if we from the high, let's say from we are getting excess rain from this part of the city, and ultimately it has to reach sea, or float through the city and reach the seashore. So in between we'll have some kind of a reservoir, natural or sometimes artificially made. Okay, and this will retain some water, and which during summers and during the time non rainy seasons and during period where we have less rainfall, these water bodies will act as a the reservoirs for us. Okay, it's kind of a reserve water for the city inhabitants and so on and so forth. So when we encroach these sponges, water bodies or water footprints, as a result what will happen, it will no longer retain. The water has to directly flow from the point of origin to the seashores. So urbanization is one of the major reason associated with the intensity of flood and the frequency of flood as well. The second thing that is mentioned is the land use pattern. Okay, how does land use pattern will have an impact on floods? For example, let's say we have a river, or let's say a flood channel or river, stream, whatever, and it is supposed to carry the flood water or excess water, excess rainwater, and to let's say from higher altitude to the seashores. Now we have land use all around the banks of the river. Let's say just theoretically we'll put something. Okay, and primarily we have some buffer areas. Okay, we don't construct anything. We will see all this in the next class on how planning is done and what kind of interventions can be are there in the form of planning guidelines, what are flood lines, so on and so forth. For now, for discussion, let's say we have some buffer area around the water channel. Now let us assume all these things are let's say mixed use, and in this side all residential. How land use will change the course of water or the water that is discharged to the city, and how this will have an impact on floods. The recent studies that is shown that if you bring more activities, excess activities in, let's say in the form of industrial activities or commercial activities where there is a larger water footprint requirements. Okay, and these land users will discharge more water into the streams and the channels. Okay, and probably this is one parcel. Let's say if you have some hundreds and thousands of such parcels across the channel. One, we are trying to increase the water that is discharged to this channel. Okay, one. The second is we are actually what are we doing? We are kind of creating a blockage. Okay, so let us say there were some natural terrains which is reaching this channels. Okay, natural drain pattern, water that will flow into the pattern, into the channel. Now we have built up something here. Okay, and definitely we will not like this channel to be cutting across my plot. What we will do, probably we will if let's say if it is a dry one, we will no longer give take this into consideration. We'll just block it here, okay? And what will happen? There is a water natural flow, and that will get stopped here. And if we do that in a multiple times, okay, there's a natural flow of water that's supposed to pass through this parcel and reach this channel, which is not happening. Okay, we are trying, because of our the induced land use or induced activities, okay, many of the smaller natural drainage line that will connect with the major drain is cut short somewhere in between. Now what will happen in case of, let's say there's a heavy rainfall, water will definitely flow here, and there is no, since there is no way for water to move further and join with this stream, it will flood. These areas will get flooded. Okay, so this is one way this can be understood. The land use pattern, when we intervene, when we come out with some kind of development, it actually we should appreciate, or we should understand the natural terrain, and then do the planning in a such a way that we do not disturb the natural drainage system. If we don't do that, probably we'll have more issues, and as many studies have been done on these lines on how change in land use has caused more flooding. Okay, in Chennai's case also I'll show you how this has impacted. So in summary, in addition to all the natural events or natural phenomena that we discussed, the rapid urbanization and change in land use pattern has created something called urban floods. This is a phenomena particularly associated with the cities. Okay, why do we get excess rain? Why do we get frequent floods in the city? All this natural phenomena one side. The second phenomena is the kind of development that we have made, and changes in the land use patterns, which by not respecting the natural terrain and so on and so forth. This is one of the major reasons why we have excess floods in the cities. There have been multiple devastating floods in different regions of India in the past, okay, among which Mumbai flood 2005, Bihar flood 7 and 8, Assam flood 2012, Uttarakhand in 2013, Jammu Kashmir flood 14, Chennai flood 2015, Kerala flood 2018, and I think this is taken in 2020. Okay, this paper is written in 2020, so there's no mention of flood that has occurred in 2020, 2021, so on. Okay, so you can see that if you put it in the entire India map, so we have floods in the north, we have floods in the south, we have floods in the east, we have floods in northwest. So none of the city is safe. Okay, it's occurring in anywhere and everywhere, Mumbai. So which means literally we have all the places, all the cities, we are getting floods. So this is something that we should keep in mind. It's not restricted to one part of the country. It has become an issue for all the cities. We'll come to this. I'll show you maybe after all the discussions that we have for today. We did one study for Chennai, flood vulnerability assessment of Chennai, and I'll show you how we did and what we did and what we were able to identify the predominant issues of this flood that occurred in 2015. Okay, the what do we have in terms of these are the issues, causes, and so on and so forth. Some understanding on how why things are happening, but how are we managing the flood? Okay, what mechanisms do you have in place to manage the floods? The flood situation in India is not simple and thus make flood management also a tedious process. Okay. However, Government of India has taken several measures to reduce the chances of flood occurrence and limit their potential consequences in the form of policies and planning measures and so on and so forth. And this we have been doing for quite some time now. For instance, Government of India has set up various committees, task force, working groups, and formulated policies that have provided recommendations for water resource management, including flood management across the country. These strategies employed a normative approach by focusing on minimizing the flood impacts through structural measures. Okay, so let us say since independence we have been trying to address this issue of floods in general, urban floods from quite recently. Why are we still not able to achieve what other countries were able to achieve, or where are we getting it wrong is something that requires more debate and discussion. But one thing that is coming out from the recent literature is our focus so far has been primarily to depend on these through structural measures, okay, and emergency responses only. So we have some physical intervention in the form of let's say the physical interventions in the cities to prevent excess flow of water, and let's say in case of if flood has occurred, then we respond. Okay, this has been primarily the approach we have adopted extensively. It has not percolated down. These ideas have not percolated down into planning or policy level guidelines, which every city should be adapting to. And that's one of the gaps that has been identified by studying all the cities in India. Where is the issue? Okay, since let's say after independence, it's been more than 70 years now. We're still trying to understand why floods are occurring, why urban floods are occurring. Don't we have plans in hand? Don't we have why our cities are not responding or not capable to handle this kind of issues? So one of the primary reason that is highlighted is the focus has so far been exclusively on structural measures. We were trying to depend too much on physical interventions, okay, and also after flood occurs we have been responding to the issue. But there are other things that can be done that is highlighted here. The policies were formulated with short-term goals, relying heavily on structural measures. This is one of the major gaps that has been identified from the literature, that why our cities are not able to address this issue in a big way. For example, let us say we had X. Let's say we are trying to make one. Let's say this is the channel, and we have studied this channel for flooding pattern historically, and we wanted to make some structural improvement in this channel so that we don't get flooded by this channel, let's say for over a period of time. So how do we do that? It's logical that let's say this channel is designed to take up X volume of water over a period of time. Let's say let's say we are getting X quantity of rain here in this part of the city, and we assume that, let's say, in not one, let's say in one day, or let's say in 8 hours, okay, 8 hours, all the water that we have here should reach to the other part, or let's say this is the shore, and the channels are designed for that. And probably if we have this ideal situation where, let's say, some X quantity of rain we have received over 8 hours, or for a specific duration of a time, the water will flow if it has all the if it is satisfying the numbers. However, due to these climate change and natural events, change in natural pattern, the rain that we are supposed to receive in 24 hours, we are receiving in 4 hours time. Okay, and you must have read this you must have seen in the newspapers and the channels that these points are highlighted. Okay, in 2021, theoretically, let's say the amount of rain, okay, that we are supposed to receive, okay, in a period of 1 month, we have received in 3 days time. So these channels are not designed for that. These channels are designed only to take up 8 hours of let's say flow. Okay, and that too in a like a consistently. Okay, let's say X volume, and over a period of 8 hours it will pass through. However, the issue is we are getting too much of water reaching the channel in a very short period of time, and that the channel no longer can take this water. Okay, and primarily we have spent a lot of time, that is what is one of the major observation that is found in the papers, that why we are having this issue is we have calculated some X number, and we have designed our channels and drainage pattern, but now the amount of water that we receive is not X, it is X plus 1. So not X plus 1, it is actually exponential, it's X plus 5. So this is one of the reason, okay, why we are not able to address this issue. Now again we have to strengthen this channel's carrying capacity so that it can take more water. Okay, but what is observed is only structural measures are not good enough if we look at the historical data. So the policies were formulated with short-term goals, relying heavily on structural measures, which largely created management system that is not adaptive enough to respond to the changes and the need to be more rational by inclining towards including the stakeholders. So one of the things that is mentioned in the paper is, apart from structural measures, the involvement of community as such in tackling the issue of urban flood or floods in general is required, and that is found to be missing in Indian system, that probably we may have to revive. And for example, in this case, to explain this phenomena, to tell what is happening and why we have been not able to do this kind of exercise, there was one example, or there was one case study done to explain what is happening in case of India. Why have we not been able to successfully do something substantial? For instance, they mentioned that there is a dam safety organization was set up to develop a unified procedure for dam safety across the country. Okay, so this is one of the initiative taken at the country level to assist how do we operate this dam? Okay, when do we operate this dam, and what is our understanding on that? How do we open it? When do we open it? All that. Okay, and there's some protocols to be done. This would assist the state government in identifying causes of potential distress and recommend suitable remedies in case of damages. But if you see the implementation of this at the ground level, as per the guideline, a set of emergency plan has to be prepared by all the cities where dams are there. Okay, and I'm sure you all are aware dams are some of the one of the structural measures where we can retain water, retain the excess water. We can retain it for depending on the capacity of the dams that we have. Okay, and excess water is let out to make this issue. This stored water will be used for agriculture and for the city and so on and so forth. And in fact, we have in Vijayawada also we have one such facility, right? I'm sure you must have all seen that. Now, as per the guidelines, this is a national guideline. A set of emergency action plan and operating manuals has to be prepared by each and every state that would help in maintaining the this particular the facility. If you see the numbers, however, only 7% of the dams that we have in India have an emergency action plan for that, and only 5% of the dams have the operating manuals for this facility. This is as of 2016. Okay, and this is based on the study in one of the papers where they've studied all the dams across the country, and they found that we don't have an emergency plan at all. Only partly some less than 10% of the city have some plan in hand, which is recommended by the national authority. Okay, so this is one issue that we should that I think that is being highlighted, and this needs to be taken it up. Why we are not taking it up? There are different issues. There are different reasons for why we are not able to achieve 100% of what is recommended by the national authority is something that we can discuss out. And based on the study, out of the study they have conducted in the 17 states across the country, only 2 states had carried out pre and post monsoon inspection of dams. Okay, this is based on 2020, and like I was telling you, every year we have to prepare ourselves before monsoon. Just the city has to prepare ourselves. Okay, maybe we may get excess rainfall this time. In anticipation, we should clean the river beds and the channels and so on and so forth, so that we don't have an issue. We don't have. We are actually prepared for it. But if you see the state based on the study, okay, only 2 states has done that kind of exercises. Okay, so the city managers or the administrators are busy in other things. Okay, this routine work is actually is not carried out the way it should have been. We have been doing it. Okay, and there is one more example. There is Rashtriya Bharg Ayog, which was constituted in 1975 to map flood-prone areas across the state. Okay, this is another initiative that for the entire country we should have flood-prone maps mapped and should be done. The committee submitted a report in 1980, after which the recommendations were forwarded in 1981 to all the states to prepare such flood-prone maps and so on and so forth. Only two of the cities, Assam and Uttar Pradesh, were the only state to validate the committee's recommendation. Okay, and many of the states does not have done or did not carry out the recommendations or that is set forth by the committee. And the reason for that is some bureaucratic issues and lack of capacity and so on and so forth. Many of the states have not implemented the idea. So, what is that we are trying to know here is, although we have some plan in hand, okay, let's say at a national level we try to have some common goal, and then we tell the state to prepare. Okay, many times that is not happening. Okay, we can see from the examples that in case of how do we operate the dam facility, and even for the mapping of flood zones in the city, we are not being successful in convincing the state. Okay, so what is the issue then? This top-down approach has been an issue. Okay, that's why there is a lot of discussion on a state should be given more right to operate on their own and prepare the disaster management plans and so on and so forth. That's one of the recommendations that has evolved to address this issue. A detailed record of flood-prone areas could not be prepared in the form of a flood atlas, as neither the Central Water Commission nor the Ganga Flood Control Commission could carry out a test check in the areas marked in the RAB plan. So we don't have, though we have a central policy, we have not been able to successfully take that policy down to state and then state to smaller urban settlements to have some kind of a mitigation plan for the city. Now things have been changing. A lot of initiatives have been taken by the state and to improve this condition. But in general, this is one of the major reasons why we are lacking why we are behind in addressing this issue. There is a constant conflict of interest between what is said and what is being done. Okay, the current management system needs to recognize the importance of considering community participation and non-structural measures for creating flood resilient communities and reducing the compounding interest. Okay, so in the previous slides I was trying to highlight we have been primarily dependent on structural measures. Okay, once we are let's say structural measure and maybe intervening when there is an emergency. That was the only approach we had. Based on various studies and based on various case studies that we can see, there's a strong need, there's a requirement for engaging the community participation in making the city resilient. Why we should get people involved? Okay, this is something that we need to have an understanding. How people will be useful in flood mitigation, so on and so forth. The very idea, for example, let's say we had some national level policy and it has to be implemented by the state. Okay, and there is a large gap between, let's say there are 100 steps being said from the national authority, only let's say from 5 or 10 steps have been done, whereas 90% of the work remains unfilled or unfulfilled. Why? Because of this lack of faith or lack of coordination and so on and so forth, constant friction, this, that. Now, if we bring people into perspective, okay, we will also see this component in the last unit when we discuss about uh, how indigenous community have been successful in addressing this issue of disasters. Okay, how the indigenous communities or the traditional settlements are successful in is in carrying out mitigation strategies or better be prepared for some kind of disasters. How historically how we have been successful. Now in the contemporary issues, why we are not able to do that. Okay, so here again one of the component that will come into picture is bringing people centric. Okay, the approach should be people centric. If people are taken into confidence and if we are sensitive and if we are given enough information on how do we prepare and what to be done in consultation with the community, then any plan implementation becomes easier. Okay, so I think you must have come across many such issues. For example, let's say there will be an idea to have a flyover in this particular area. There will be 50% of the people who will say no, we should not have this, and another 50% of the people saying we should have this. Okay, so there is a conflict of interest. So when there is a conflict of interest, the project, the implementation becomes an issue, and so on and so forth. That has to be addressed. If people are taken into consensus, if people are advised or people are apprised on what is the kind of mitigation measures or planning measures that is being taken, okay, they will be informed and they will participate in successful implementation of these kind of ideas. So what is this idea called? Actually, the public participation, people participation in planning is one of the component that is part and parcel of master plan making. Okay, what do you mean by that? See, if we are making one city plan or if we are making some interventions in the city, and we say that okay, we are going to plan one big let's say city level infrastructure in this part of the city. Okay, in order to make this idea successful, what we need is people's consent of whether this kind of work can be done, whether there is a requirement for this kind of infrastructure in the city, whether we are happily accepting this kind of infrastructure. Actually, if we do this exercise, okay, all the planning measures or all the ideas that we have for the city, it will be possible for us to implement in a correct manner. However, if you don't consider the public opinion at all, okay, I think I don't have to give examples for that. Now we have a lot of work being done where people are not consented. Okay, city level infrastructures are being done where people are not consented. People have no say at all. Okay, these kind of projects will eventually fail. Eventually, probably now it may not look that evident. There will not be an acceptability for this kind of infrastructure in the community. So that's why in the planning process, what is required is the participation of community in any development plan or any policy making, and so on and so forth. The second one is the non-structural measures. What is non-structural measures? Again, we will discuss this in detail a little later in the next discussion classes. One such non-structural measure is the capacity building of the stakeholders in various various departments. For example, let us say we all know that every day new technologies are being added. Okay, new techniques have been added in terms of, let's say, how do we understand city, how do we predict flood models, how do we simulate and see what will happen if we get an X amount of rain, so on and so forth. However, the decision maker at the in the city is probably not equipped with these kind of techniques and technologies. Okay, so capacity building is one such initiative that should be taken consistently, very consistently. This has to be done because in academia and in research there's a lot of work being done. Okay, a lot of new models, new tools for assessing flood. Let's say we are discussing flood, I'm just using that flood as an example. So we have different tools for modeling flood, assessment of floods, simulation for flood, and how do we prepare all that. We do have some case studies, and we do have mathematical models, simulation models being developed in academia and research, but that many a times it remains as research only. Okay, it does not go to the one who is in need of it, who is nothing but the decision makers at the city level. Okay, so these tools, whatever ideas that we are trying to develop, should go to them so that they can take a decision. We are not the decision makers, we are just facilitators. We can say that to the best of our ability, we can say, okay, these are the areas will have issues if we get an excess water of X quantity and so on and so forth, and these areas require some kind of intervention. But can we, as an individual or as an academic institution or as a researcher, can we go and do something here? We can't do that. Okay, this has to go to the city administrator, the decision maker, who can take a call on, okay, how if we have to manage this flood, I think we need this intervention based on the study done here. Okay, that is not happening, and that's why this is one of the areas where a lot of funding is also available. Okay, and like I told you, I don't know whether I told you or not. Currently, I am involved in one of the projects. It's called CREST. BRUCOM, I think you already know. I guess I don't know whether you are BRUCOM. Building Resilient Urban Communities. Okay, this is one of the project, EU funded project. That was also one of the deliverables of this project was to do capacity building programs for decision makers, capacity building program for professionals. Okay, so that they know what is the current research that is happening in this particular field, and how these ideas they can take it to their day-to-day work. Now I have luckily, fortunately, I have also been part of one of the project which last month we have received funding. It's UK funded, British Council funding on community resilient, energy secure environment. Okay, we are trying to come out with an idea how we can make a community resilience in built environment research. Okay, so what are we trying to do is we are trying to come out with some kind of module on building materials, buildings, assessment of buildings, assessment of neighborhoods and cities for resilience. What are the tools available for assessing building material for resilience? Assessment tool for evaluating resilience at building level, assessment tool for evaluating the neighborhood and city level. Here again, one of the output or one of the requirement for this funding is also to do capacity building program for professionals. So there are a lot of funding opportunity as well in this particular area. So we don't have directly programs which says that okay, let us do non-structural measures. We don't have like that. It's indirectly there are a lot of fundings available, a lot of ideas being there floated by the government and other national and international agencies to do capacity building program. Okay, these are things that will come under non-structural measures. We will discuss this in detail little in the later stages, but these are the major gaps that has been identified in the literature. Why we are still not able to cope up with the disaster which are so frequent in nature. Okay, I think I'll stop here. We can actually continue, but I think let's stop here.